She's been working on kind of the unnamed indigenous salt and hospice center. That was a big category.
Just remind me of how you turn it on.
You guys talk right now.
It's recording right now.
This is about a line track.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Well, we really got a full house today. Many of you are members of the museum, and I just want to welcome you back to your home here. We have some other friends that the Russell Museum is also their home, and those are members of the Montana Cowboy Hall of Fame. Yay. So many of you are from the Cowboy Hall of Fame, and I want to welcome you home to the Russell Museum. Some of our events at the Cowboy Hall of Fame just wrapped up, and so we'll have a few people still coming in. If you don't know me, my name is Chris Ward, and I'm the Executive Director of the C.M. Russell Museum, and I'm excited today to introduce our speaker. Before we do that, I want to give a shout out to a couple people who can't be here today, but two people, Jessica Niebel, who is our Senior Director of Operations, and Tom Petrie, who serves on our board, really had the vision to put our speaker together today that you're going to hear from. Will is a nationally known speaker, and he's an amazing writer, author, and journalist. And so we don't always get people of his caliber here in Great Falls. And so we're really honored that he was able to travel in specifically to contribute to our members and to also be here for our friends from the Montana Cowboy Hall of Fame. So thanks to Jessica and Tom who did that. So a little bit about Will Grant. Will was born and raised outside of Denver, Colorado. He became a horse trader and a trainer, and it started really a journey that took him through Wyoming, Texas, and further, and you'll learn some of this from him around the world. He apprenticed under a legendary horseman, and I was talking to people from the Cowboy Hall of Fame today, if a horseman qualifies as a cowboy, and you do. But he trained under legendary horseman Jack Bernard, And in 2008, after a wonderful career of being a horseman, his career took a little bit of a twist, and he pivoted over to journalism. And since, he has been a writer for Outside Magazine, which I know many of you know. It's one of the best journals, really, on living outside and living in the West. But he's also penned things for the Wall Street Journal and for Bloomberg Business Week. He's a really amazing storyteller himself, but what I like that I learned as I read his book and some of his history to prepare for today is that he has a sense of adventure, much like what brought Charlie Russell out west. He's interested in things, and he immerses himself more than most of us, more than 99% of us. And so it's from those people that do those deep immersions that we get to learn and see a perspective and hear some stories that are really just amazing. An example of that is his first book that he's here to talk on, called The Last Ride of the Pony Express. It is the stories of what he saw, who he met, and what he learned on a 2,000-mile journey retracing the route of the Pony Express. I'm very excited. Please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Will Grant.
All right. Is this microphone on? Yes. Sounds like it. Well, I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad to talk to you about what I saw and learned on the Pony Express Trail. I would like to say thank you to Chris and all the staff here at the museum. I would like to say thank you to Montana Cowboy Hall of Fame and to my good friend Tom Petrie, who helped make this happen. This is my pleasure to talk to you about all this. So, I've been a horseman all my life. I loved horses early. First picture of me on a horse is when I'm 2 years old. So I loved horses all my life. Went to college. As soon as I got out of college, started breaking colts, riding young horses. Then I went to work for the old man, Jack Brainerd. In 2008, pivoted to journalism. Went to the University of Montana, Missoula, to study journalism. Then after that, it was a 2-year program. I went to work for Outside Magazine in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that's where I live now. And when I got into journalism, I really felt a strong urge that I had to write a book, and I wanted to write about the West, the American West. I wanted to somehow write a book that covered what I considered to be the West. And the Pony Express emerged as my avenue to do so. Because the Pony Express was a transcontinental mail service in 1860. Carried letter mail, just letters, from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. St. Joseph, Missouri was the end of the railroad in 1860. So that's why the Pony Express left from there. It went to Sacramento, California. 380,000 people lived in California at that time. They were always itching for faster communication with the East. I think it's a condition of humanity that we always want faster communication. That's what the Pony Express set up to do. It advertised a 10-day delivery schedule from St. Joseph to Sacramento for your letter. In 1860, there were 2 ways to send a letter from like New York City to California. One was a steamship. It went down the coast to Panama, put the mail on donkeys, packed it over the isthmus, put it on a steamship up to San Francisco. That took about a month. The other was the Butterfield stagecoach. It went down south to El Paso. That took about 3 weeks, weather permitting. Both those, the weather obviously influenced. And they were expensive, but they weren't as expensive as the Pony Express. So the Pony Express came along as a way to get a letter faster, in 10 days. This is about 2,000 miles. And they set up what's called a fast horse relay, which means you travel at speed. So every station was spaced 10, 15, 20 miles apart. You go as fast as you could, get on a fresh horse, transfer the mail, and each rider did about 100 miles. There were 198 stations strung out along this 2,000 miles. So this is a lot of infrastructure. There's not a lot going on in 1860 between Salt Lake and Sacramento. To Casper, Wyoming, was the Oregon Trail in the vicinity of Casper. So there were some structures. There were like road ranches there. But west of there, there was almost nothing. So the Pony Express had to build a lot of these stations. They had to put together the infrastructure by which they could deliver a letter in 10 days. And the mail went both directions twice a week. It cost $5 to send a letter on tissue-thin paper. That's about $160 today. So these weren't like personal correspondences. These were like between merchants, politicians, bankers, government correspondence. It was expensive, and it took a lot of horses to make this happen, and a lot of people. 198 stations. We think each station had to have 6 horses. They're running 20 miles with the mail. This requires a lot of horse flesh. This is how they carried the mail. This is called a mochila, mochilla. Same word in Spanish as backpack, pack saddle. There are 4, they call these cantinas, 4 saddlebags. They put the letters. They wrapped them in oilcloth to protect them from the elements, and they locked those padlocks. In St. Joseph, they'd unlock them in Sacramento. Same thing going the other way. Lock them in Sacramento, unlock them in St. Joseph. This is a removable saddle skirting that they could take off the spent horse, throw it on the fresh horse, and off you go. And the Pony Express was very expensive. Very expensive. It only lasted 18 months. The Pony Express cast a long shadow out west. Very few people you can talk to say, no, I never heard of it. We almost all heard of it, but it was like a flash in the pan. 18 months. And the reason it was so expensive was because of the infrastructure. The horsepower required, the manpower required, and they couldn't carry enough mail to pay the bills. It was a heroic effort, but it was a short-lived effort. This is Frederick Remington's painting, The Coming and Going of the Pony Express. Incidentally, Charlie Russell never painted Pony Express, as far as I can tell. Might be people in this room who know more about this than I. As far as I can tell, he never did. This is the spent horse. Come in. This is the fresh horse, leaving with the saddlebags. These are the station keepers, stock tenders. Very important, right? You got a corral full of 6 horses here. These horses got to be in working order. Whether they need shoes on their feet, anything, It takes a lot of guys to look after those horses. This would be a superintendent, this guy, observing the coming and going of the Pony Express. This could be Utah, could be Wyoming, could be Nevada. There's no cover, there's no trees. It's a very desolate existence for the guys that were condemned to ride here. Young Pony Express man, off he goes. He's carrying a gun. No one really knows. They carried guns at the beginning. Apparently they also carried a Bible. But I'll tell you what, by the end of it, these guys were going as light as they could. That pistol right there isn't going to do you a lot of good. What's going to do you a lot of good is a fresh horse. And I think this is, in my opinion, the most accurate depiction of this. So my thought was, well, I'll retrace this trail and surely come away a wiser man. I'll be able to shed some light on what happened, how it all shook out. And for me, traveling by horseback, doing it with 2 horses, going very slowly, was an organic way to approach this. I'm a horse guy. I feel better about life when I'm on the back of a horse. So I said, let's do it. And one thing I wanted to see, this is what you see today. On all the small towns on the Pony Express route, you see a lot of bronze statues. Every one of them shows a running horse. Our mythology with the Pony Express says that they just ran those horses all the time. It's not true. A lot of conditions where you can't run a horse, and I'll show you. But more importantly, is that these small towns all across the West really get a sense of identity and context from the Pony Express. It puts them on the map, and that's important to them. And I found this interesting, because the way we interpret our history affects our psychology, our psyche right now. How do we fit in to this continuum of the American West? Pony Express certainly serves that role for a lot of people. This is the first day, May 5th, 2019, St. Joseph, Missouri. Pony Express Stables. It's a museum today. It's worth seeing. It's cool. It's fairly well done. And a quick word about my horses. I bought these horses for the trip. The buckskin horse out front is named Chicken Fry. Chicken Fry is, in Texas slang, that's a chicken fried steak. It's what every cowboy wants for dinner. It's a chicken fried steak. Chicken Fry was born in Mexico. Very intelligent horse. One of the most intelligent horses I've ridden. And unflappable. Doesn't spook easy, not easily rattled. This is Badger, the bay horse. He's a quarter horse. He's by a son of a horse named Rowdy Yankee, and he's an athlete. When I rode both these horses, they got a long walk. If you're going to ride from Missouri to California, the last thing you want is a lazy horse. I mean, they can take you who knows how long if you have to kick them every way. So they're both like really athletic horses, very sensitive horses. What I was worried about was stepping on a beer bottle in the borrow ditch of the highway. What I wanted was a horse who would see the beer bottle. You know, some horses, they see a coil of rusty barbed wire there, they don't even know what's there, they just keep walking. That's not the horse I wanted. I wanted horses that were sharp. This is a long trip. I'm going to be riding on the sides of highways, interstates, out there alone with my horses. These are good, broke horses. The Mexican horse, Chicken Fry, we don't know how old he was. Born in Mexico, probably 12 years old by his teeth. Badger was 10 years old. Mature horses. Way too much work for a young horse. Way too much work. So this is in St. Joseph, which is on the east side of the Missouri River. Missouri River, about a half-mile wide. The bridge going over it, it's 4 lanes both directions, 60 miles an hour. I was like, how am I going to do this? I got a sheriff's escort. Buchanan County Sheriff escorted me over the bridge. It was very cool. It was like the most exciting few moments of the whole trip. and we made it. And so we're looking pretty good here. The horses still have a little winter hair on them. You know, we come out of the Rocky Mountains. It's like May 5th is not summer. And I thought they looked pretty rough when we started. But, and I was nervous. I mean, I didn't eat for 2 weeks before this. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I wanted to do was get started. Like, let's just do this, you know. So I did it. Crossed the Missouri River, and I landed in Doniphan County, Kansas. And this is the northeast corner of Kansas. And it's kind of like what you'd expect, really tidy farms. What people told me about Doniphan County is those farmers have straight fences. And when you say someone's got straight fences, it means they're a clean operator. No place for a horseman, really. They don't know what to do with a guy, with a pack horse, a saddle horse, you know. But they were nice, it's good country, tidy farms. It's different from me. This part of Kansas is called the Los Hills. It's glacial sediment that came down, and they say the topsoil there is 70 feet thick. I mean, this is fertile country. Really, really good soil, this dark black soil. You know, it's like, it's hard to see, but it's full of earthworms. But this is one reason why the Pony Express did not run their horses always. There was not one track, 1 foot of railroad track west of St. Joseph in 1860. There was no road base. There was no gravel roads. This is a really taxing footing for a horse. They slip. You cannot run a horse on this. You can run a horse, but he's probably going to slip and fall over with you. Pony Express couldn't run their horses all the time. Just wasn't possible. At night, on a moonless night, you can't just blaze this horse off into the darkness. You know, someone's going to get hurt. You got to be careful. This is one reason why. This was, and I'll tell you, it rained those like first 2 weeks going through Kansas. My boots never dried out. Nothing dried out. It wasn't the most fun part of the trip. That's for sure. This is the Pony Express station. This is like 10 miles south to the Nebraska line. This is the Hollenberg Pony Express station. And you can go visit it today. It's administered by the National Park Service, and I camped right there. And I never worried about getting permission permission to camp on government land. Because there's no camping here, but I camped here because I'm a Pony Express rider. Surely I can do it, you know. And you know, I felt very strongly, you know, in the West, like private land is a big deal. Some people don't know that, but I felt very strongly about always having permission to cross private land, to camp on private land. Public land, I was like, I'm a taxpayer. Doesn't make any difference to me. They say that this was a road ranch on part of the Oregon Trail, and they say the Pony Express riders and the stock tenders slept upstairs in the attic, and travelers would get meals and stuff below. This, you'll see, but this is a really nice Pony Express station. This clapboard or whatever it is, this reflects an abundance of timber and tools. It was not necessarily available farther west. 9 miles south of the Nebraska line. Finally made it into Nebraska. And boy, I hit corn country. This is some serious corn farming going on in this part of Nebraska. And like these tractors, you know, I'm a horse guy. I have no interest in a tractor like that at all, and never have. But it was a real education to me to ride in these tractors, to see a $500,000 piece of equipment. You know, something to be said for that. And 3 things that make this. These guys can get 250 bushels of corn per acre. You're almost not going to find any denser harvested corn anywhere in the world. These are really fertile soils. The 3 things that make this farming possible: fertile soil, level land. You can't farm on a slope, you know, you get your runoff, lose your topsoil, and the Ogallala Aquifer. Ogallala Aquifer supplies a lot of water to these farmers, and this is big business. It was an education for me. This is the same farm. This is my gear right here in the center. I carried 80 pounds of gear, 2 panniers on either side of a pack sack. Weighed between 35 and 40 pounds apiece, depending on how much food I had. And I weighed them out every morning, of course. You got to make sure your load is balanced and everything. And I would try to travel 25 miles per day. When I started this, before I started it, I sort of mapped out my, you know, my rough itinerary. And I decided that 4 days of travel, 1 day of rest. 25 miles per day, then 4 days in a row, and then rest. Didn't work out that way. But at least it was a plan, make me feel a little better. It didn't work out. Like, so I would get delayed by the weather. That's why I'm sleeping in this guy's shop right here. Because this night, 13 tornadoes touched down in central Nebraska. This is not the kind of weather you want to be camping out with your horses. No, these storms are for real out there. You know, these prairie storms, you read about the old accounts, if flip a wagon over and the wagon sheet would be gone, all your livestock would be gone. You know, they had a hell of a time with these spring storms. And so I would sleep in shops. And like this guy, Daryl Mosier, he's like, we got a room in the house for you. I'm like, boy, I can't do it. You know, I didn't want to sleep in anybody's house. Throughout this entire trip, I didn't want to sleep in anybody's house. I was so dirty. You know, I had all this gear. I smelled like a wet saddle blanket. I was like, I'll use the shower, but I'm not sleeping inside. So I would sleep in people's shops and barns, camp in their corrals, you know, lean to get me out of the weather. And inevitably, there were barn cats in these things. They were just like wild little leopards running all around. But I didn't care. So I spent a lot of nights in shops like this. This is what a good camp looked like. I just, you know, I had a bedroll there. I'd lean against my saddles. I always tried to get to where I was going by 3 or 4 in the afternoon to give me a couple-hour cushion before dark, so that if there was any kind of problems, I could have a few hours to deal with it. This is the electric fence. So I contained my horses with an electric fence that was about 60 foot by 60 foot. And it had a little solar charger. It had 5 posts, the wire around it, and the charger, and that all weighed 22 pounds. And this was a very effective way of containing my horses, and a guy who advised me to this is a packer for Forest Service. And he's actually out in the Bitterroot Valley of Montana, and you know, you see like 9 mules. You know, this guy's a real packer. And he told me that this was the way to fewest sounded like my kind of plan. Stay out of trouble. But really, in these afternoons, lying next to my horses, it's really nice. And this is like an ideal camp right here. A lot of grass, quiet. This is in Nebraska. So I paralleled the Oregon Trail for a long time. And I would see these markers. This is marked by the state of Nebraska, 1912. The Narrows. And I was hearing a lot about the Oregon Trail. And when you hear about the Oregon Trail, you hear about like families, cholera, furniture, wagons, like all of this stuff that settlers had with them. This was in stark contrast to the experience of a Pony Express rider. So this is the Narrows in southern Nebraska. And this swale, that depression you can see right there, this is a man named John Greer, and I stayed at his house while the weather went through for like 3 days. And he took me out here. This was graded by the Army, and to make it easier for the wagons to come up. It's called the Narrows because it was a bottleneck. And one of the things I learned is like, if you're a Pony Express rider, because I'd have all day to think about this, right? If you're a Pony Express rider, and you're trying to make time, whether you're like easy loping that horse or you're just in a long trot, and you come around the corner, and you got like a wagon train bottleneck, this would be a disaster. You know, like dogs running everywhere, cattle that are loose horses. And it made me think the Pony Express riders were probably not too happy to see immigrants. You know, it's a much different thing. They were from the east, they were traveling, they always had questions about how long to the next water, how long this. Pony Express rider, very different experience because these wagons also only came through in the summer months. Pony Express was doing it all year round. Got pretty lonely about 1st of October. This is a Pony Express station in central Nebraska. It's on private land, a ranch called the 96 Ranch. I had permission to camp there, and I did so right here. And they protected the station with this steel building. But this is made out of cedar logs. And it's called the Midway Pony Express Station. And it's a little bit more rudimentary than the Hollenberg, but it still looks pretty good. And it's in good shape. And you can see this, you know, the family allows visitors, and there's another one there. Nebraska's really good about preserving. Nebraska State Historical Society is really good about interpreting and displaying and preserving history. So, Midway Pony Express Station. This is what, as I emerged from the corn country, you know, I got out of all that farming business. I started to hit more open country, the plains, and this was a big relief for me. My boots dried out, my horses are looking pretty fit, right? 25 miles a day, they really got fit. And like I would say, you could bounce a quarter off that horse's butt because the muscles were so tight. This is looking north toward the Platte River. It's a thin green strand there, and this is just east of the Colorado line. And these were the best days right here. You know, let the wind blow between my toes a little bit. It was always nice, and it was nice to be on this high prairie country. And one thing I'll say is that these grasslands through Nebraska and stuff, you have a heck of a time finding the native grass. It's almost all been plowed under, broken up, break up the prairie. That's what they call it when they plowed her under. And it was very difficult to find that rangeland, but you could see it. And so from Nebraska, I broke into Wyoming. And this is near Guernsey, Wyoming. And Guernsey, Wyoming is famous for the Oregon Trail ruts, where you can see where the wagons made ruts in the bedrock. And my horses right here are standing on the Oregon Trail. This slight depression is left from the wagons. And it was interesting to me to think about, like, what is the effect of the hand of man? What can you, when you look at this landscape, how has it changed? What is the same and what is different? And one thing that's different is this purple grass you see here. That's cheatgrass. I mean, cheatgrass, I don't know what we're going to do about cheatgrass, but I saw it every step of the way. Every state I went through, I'd hear about cheatgrass. And It's an invasive species.
Are you saying cheap?
Cheat. C-H-E-A-T grass, and it's a real problem. It came from Asia, and they don't know how to put this cat back in the bag. This is a big deal. It has bad effects on sage grouse, on fire danger, all kinds of stuff. And I saw it all along the trail. And so this is in central Wyoming, and I was finally hitting BLM land. I was finally on open country, more like where you want to ride a horse than navigating between cropland corn. So from Casper was the beginning of the Rocky Mountains. And this is west of Casper in the Sweetwater Valley. This is the Split Rock Ranch, because this cleft, this gun sight cleft in the top of that rock is Split Rock. And it's a historic ranch, and it's nice country. And this is the Sweetwater River. And they grow some serious mosquitoes in this country. It's famous for its mosquitoes, and the only place I've seen that can compare to it would be Minnesota or Alaska. But one thing about this is that I was drinking surface water. So irrigation ditches, creeks, whatever. I was drinking surface water for the most part. And I really developed a taste for water. Something that we've lost because we just turn on the tap. Here it comes, city water, whatever, well water. And this is good water. This was like cool, clean, Rocky Mountain water. And it was good for my horses, and it was good for me, and things were about to go a little bit downhill. But this is, they haven't gone downhill yet, they're going uphill. I'm climbing towards South Pass. The Pony Express Trail crossed the Continental Divide at South Pass, Wyoming. It's at the south end of the Wind River Range. It was the only place that they could find north of basically the Mexican line where you could get a wagon over the Continental Divide. This was a big deal, get a wagon over there, because now we can encourage settlement. South Pass is very gentle, if you've ever been there. I mean, you climb up, you just barely know it's a watershed. And it is just the prettiest country to ride through. This is like the middle of July. Or second week of July. And it was beautiful. 2019 was a wet year. So there was grass every step of the way, climbing up to the Continental Divide. Very good. That was very serendipitous that I hit this wet year. Because I didn't carry any feed for my horses. I didn't carry grain. I didn't carry anything. I carried a few treats, like little apple treats, to like keep the morale up. But I didn't carry any grass. I didn't carry any hay or grain or anything, or pellets or any of that business. And South Pass in July was just as pretty as it gets. But it's at 7,400 feet, más o menos, more or less. And it gets cool there. I mean, at night it's cool. And so this made me think, like, what did the Pony Express riders do in the winter? Because this country's full of snow. And you got to do 20 miles on horseback alone in the middle of the night in January? I mean, you're taking your life in your hands. You know, what about wool socks and gloves? How do they keep their feet warm? Anybody who's been on a horse in the middle of winter knows that your feet can just turn into blocks of ice. So how did they cross this in the winter? You know, and how did they not get lost? And the storms that come through here, they come out of that Yellowstone area and funnel around the Wind Rivers. And this is for real winter country, you know. The wind. I mean, you know, they say in Wyoming, one day the wind quit blowing and every chicken in the state fell over. It's like, and the wind is for real out there. I mean, your hat can blow off, and then you find in the barbed wire fence like a mile downwind, you know. So I don't know how they did it in the winter. No one's ever told me that. No one's ever been able to share any light on that. But this was good country, and this is the one time during the ride when someone came with me. A good friend of mine who lives in Jackson, Wyoming, brought his horse down and camped with me for 4 nights as we crossed the Continental Divide. And that's the only time really someone rode with me. And it was nice to have him along. And he took this, and we did good. We covered that Continental Divide. This is a map of precipitation in the lower 48 states. And here's South Pass, right here. And then I got down to Salt Lake City, which is right here. That's the end of the Rocky Mountains. I spent a week in Salt Lake City. Got a haircut, bought a new pair of underwear, rested my horses, you know. But west of Salt Lake is the Great Basin. This is like a real desert environment. And it was a little worrying. There's no cell phone service out there. There's no water out there. There's no grass out there. And it was pretty intimidating. And I left Salt Lake City on August 5th, the teeth of summer. This is the country I rode into. No trees, right? No trees, no shade, no trees, very little grass. Very much of this is saline soil. It's, you know, from the Great Salt Lake, the evaporation of the old lakes. This is hard country. This is the kind of country you could kill a horse riding too hard. You know, this is the country that plagued the Donner Party. It delayed them so much that they were stuck in the Sierra Nevadas because this desert was more than they could. They handled it, but it was a lot, just barely, you know. It's hard country to cover on horseback. It's remote in a car today. And so the way I did it was I hired a 17-year-old Mormon kid to drop hay and water in 5 different locations between Salt Lake City and the Nevada state line. 133 miles, 5 drops. We did it on our cell phones. We looked at it and I said, just right behind this juniper tree, man. You gotta put this right here. I mean, it's just a kid, you know, he's been riding for a year, you know? And so this is what it gave me. 3 mineral tubs. That's about 90 gallons of water in a 3-strand bale of alfalfa grass mix. Heavy bale of hay. 90 gallons of water. If you Google how much water a horse needs per day, it says like 10 to 12 gallons. 90 gallons of water, and in the morning, I was drinking the same water, by the way. And there'd be like 3 inches of water left. I mean, these horses were drinking some water. And so this is on one of these mountain ranges where it's like isolated ecosystems where there actually is grass up there. But I didn't know that. You know, I couldn't count on that, not having seen the country. So I still had to make those drops. And he did 5 drops, 133 miles. But I had counted, there's a ranch out there that I had contacted that was expecting me. So I was planning on 6 days to pull across the desert. I ended up resting at that ranch, but it worked. You know, the kids, I found the water, and what I was worried about was that these tubs of water would be sitting out there for 4 or 5 days a week without anybody looking at them, and I didn't want the wild horses to come and upset them because that would have been a disaster because my horses were thirsty, drinking 40 gallons of water a day, you know? And so this is definitely wild horse country. And just west of Salt Lake there, the BLM has really put in a lot of water infrastructure for these horses. And I knew this was coming. I talked to a BLM horse specialist before. I said, well, what's going on? You know, I want to camp at Simpson Springs. And she said, there's horses there. And I said, I know that, you know, but I want to camp at the water hole. I said, well, how many horses? And she said, about 400. I was like, 400 horses? You know, 400 wild horses? Me and chicken fry and badger? You know what I mean? I was like, this is crazy. But, and I said, well, how far are they from the water hole? And she's like, well, I was out there like 3 days ago and they were a quarter mile. A quarter mile? I mean, that's nothing for a horse. They were at the water hole. So this is what I started seeing, and I'll tell you, it was like an anomaly to see this cool, clear water in the middle of this desert that was just all rock and sky, you know? So I found the wild horse herd, or they found me, and I had an encounter. This is a middle-aged stallion, a stud. And man, this was a tough deal. He saw me from like a quarter mile away, half mile away, and here he comes in a dead run. And I thought, shit, what am I going to do? And so what I did is I got off my horses because I didn't want to like be dealing with the pack horse like helicoptering around me, you know, and we'd have a real wreck. Because if you lose domestic horses among wild horses, you're in a world of trouble. This is a big deal to get your horses back, and I thought that would be a real tragedy for chicken fry and badger. They have no business running wild horses wearing their saddles and their gear and stuff. So I threw rocks at this horse. rocks about the size of like a lemon or a baseball. And I stuffed my pockets with them and put some in the saddlebags, and that stud came, and I cursed him, and I threw rocks at him. And this is when he stood off. I was like, I better get a picture of this big old. So, and he's a good-looking horse, right? This is what the Pony Express want. Big old stout roan horse, you know, covered in scars. Like, this is not a horse that's going to feel sorry for itself. If you got to run 20 miles through the middle of the night in January, this is the guy you want right here. But getting him broke take a little work. You got to catch him first. These wild horses, though, were a big deal. It was interesting. I saw this herd of 400, you know, beautiful, but very scary for me. So here you go. This is how you get snow blindness in August. This is tough country right here. You know, this is part of that old Salt Lake, the bed, the lake beds. And that grass is like salt grass, and it's so bright, it could just give you sunburn looking at it. And these horses, and like I said, it's the second week of August. You know, this is a pretty tough time to be crossing the desert. And so during this stage, I was waking up at like 3:30 in the morning to have my oatmeal. I had a little packet of instant oatmeal every morning. And I'd have my oatmeal in the dark, get everything ready, so by first light, as soon as I knew I wasn't riding over the top of the rattlesnake, I'd be ready to go. And I tried to get to camp at like 1 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon, and then wait out the heat of the day. And it was a hard pull. You know, those horses like deserve a lot of credit for sticking with it and for just, you know, the hay and water drops saved us. How to do it before that, I think your horses would really suffer. You'd have to know where to go. And that's part of the beauty of modern technology. This is one of the Pony Express stations in that desert, what's called the West Desert of Utah. This is like 30 miles east of the Nevada line, and this is just local stone, loosely mortared. The station's in ruins. These stations were so primitive out there. We have two accounts, really. One, guys who saw the Pony Express in action and wrote about it. One was the British explorer, Sir Richard Burton, same guy who tried to find the source of the Nile River, all this. Well, in 1861 or 1860, he crossed the West, and he wrote about it. And he describes a station in Utah that was a hole dug into the side of a hill with a pole corral for the horses, and the two guys there were eating wolf steaks. This is pretty tough existence, you know. They didn't have any furniture, they didn't have any firewood, they were eating a wolf, you know, and they got 6 horses in this corral. But even more so than that, this station had no water source. You know, this soil out here is really rough. And so there were 15 stations that had no water source. So they had to have water hauled in. And I did the math on this with also a historian who had done a lot of research. And we think that they would have, like, they had water wagons, hold 500 gallons in a tank, 6 mule team to pull this. 500 gallons of water, that's 4,000 pounds. This is a lot of freight. Moving water, hauling water is hard, even buckets, you know. So they had to do that twice a week. So you got a guy, you have dedicated teams of mule drivers to supply 15 stations with water. This is just very difficult for me to wrap my head around how this was even possible, you know? And this is why it was so expensive. Because just to keep this one swing station, right, where the riders can stay there, come in, get on a fresh horse, I mean, you're burning through 2,000 gallons or 1,000 gallons a week, and you know, relying on the mule teams. This is part of why the Pony Express costs so much money to keep running. And this must have been a very difficult place to live and keep horses at that time. 15 stations had no water. So I broke into Nevada. I made the 133 miles across the desert, and boy, as soon as I rode into Nevada, it changed. Eastern Nevada was beautiful country to me. It's the basin and range. So you have vertical north-south mountain ranges with valleys between. I crossed 14 mountain ranges going across Nevada. And some of these valleys are 20 miles wide. So I'd be camped here, I could see across that valley in the road just as straight as a rifle shot. And I'd be sitting there on my horse looking at the same view all day. And, you know, it really had like an effect on time and space. And it was so quiet and it was so remote that this is White Pine County, I think, and it is like one of the least populated counties in the lower 48. And so I could spend all day without seeing another human, just looking at the same view, and it was so cool. It was such a great feeling. So clean, you know, my priorities were distilled down, that there was not all the clutter of life. It was just me and Chicken Brian Badger. And there is water out there. So I would be in contact with local ranchers, tell them I'm coming through, you know, where can I camp, where can I find water? And they could tell you about these little pockets. And then, if you look at the satellite image on your phone, you can see this. You can see this water trough because of the green vegetation around it. And so I was like, okay, so now I know where we're going. And this road, if you can see there, is what I came across. This valley, this is the Steptoe Valley. And this valley is like 12 miles wide. I camped on the other side of this mountain range the night before, crossed that range, and this is just about at camp. And this road right here, this is the Pony Express Road, is what it's labeled on maps, dirt road. And like 20 feet off to the side, off to the right of it, is the actual Pony Express trail. And you can still see the scars in the dirt, you know, the trace of the old trail. And I would ride on that. And I found mule shoes, horse shoes, oxen shoes, because they used ox teams to supply the Pony Express stations. So I would find these artifacts sitting there on the dirt, look like they've been sitting there for 150 years just waiting for someone to come look at it. It was very cool, and eastern Nevada was probably the highlight of my trip because there's a lot of grass, very good climate. This is about 7,000 feet elevation, nice cool nights, and nobody out there. Just me and my horses all day long. This is the kind of stuff you see crossing Nevada. Bunches of Mustangs, not 400 of them. That happens in Utah at that one place where the BLM has got all of them just right there. You see bunches of 6, 8, 10 mares with a stud, with a stallion. And this is how the Mustangs lived out there. And it seemed like really good country for horses. Some of these guys are telling me it's not good country for cattle out there, a lot of it. It's too far between water sources, the relief up and down. The old cows just have a heck of a time with it. With the wild horses, they do well. You're looking at 3 mares here and 3 babies. And they trot up to me and kind of look me over, and then they just blow off into the scrub. It was pretty cool to see. It's an issue of these wild horses, but it's good horse country. And this is right near a place called Cherry Creek, Nevada, and this is a lot of grass. This is good country out here. I enjoyed it. This is the other thing you see, rattlesnakes. Saw plenty of rattlesnakes. Great Basin rattlesnakes. And this snake was coming, this is Overland Pass. There's about 6 places that are called Overland Pass on the trail. But, you know, I saw this snake coming, and I was riding, and I was like, oh my goodness, we're going to cross the road at the same time. So I stopped the horses to let the snake go by. Because, and the horses like kind of looked at me, you know, our communication was just dialed right in with those horses. And they're like, why are we stopping? To let the snake go past. Because, you know, camped out there alone in this desert with these 2 horses, all alone, no cell phone reception. Like, it's a little, the stakes are high, right? And so I started thinking about like my karma. And I wanted to have as little impact on the environment, the ecosystem, the people as possible. I wanted to pass through like a ghost, you know? And in one place where I camped, there was an old water trough there for sheep. It still had some water, and I penned my horses around it. And as I was walking to fill my water bottle out of it, a rattlesnake was right underneath the water trough. Good place for a snake. And it scared me, and I jumped back, and it was hissing, and I picked up a rock, and I was about to kill it because I got my horses penned here, and I'm going to sleep in my bedroll right here. And like, I don't want this snake to crawl in my bedroll with me at night. bite one of my horses. But then I was like, if I kill this snake, I'm like, this is a bad card to play. You know, I'm out here all alone, and I have to just travel as light and with as little impact as I can. And that became like pretty profound for me. I never left any trash. I tried to just travel as light as I could. Plenty of snakes, that's this small one. This is the other thing you find, sleeping on the ground every night. Rolled up my bedroll, and there was a black widow spider that was trying to get back in the bedroll, so I pulled out my Leatherman pliers and grabbed it, and I took a picture of it because I was like, my partner, Claire, my girlfriend, she's here tonight, or this afternoon, I was like, she's never going to believe me. She's going to think it's just one more cowboy story, you know. Yeah, black widows under your bedroll every night, but I'm telling you, it was the case a few times. So you get a real intimacy with the land traveling through this country. This is what is called a bad water source. This is where a Pony Express station was, called Grubb's Well. And a rancher had told me that there's water. There was a really bad phone conversation because it kept breaking up. And I was like, is there water at Grubb's Well? And he's like, you're fine, there's water. And this is what I rode up to. And the water had like a pinkish hue to it, which you can't see. It smelled bad. Chicken Fry and Badger put their noses down to it and lifted them up. And they didn't want to drink it. And I didn't want to drink it either. And so I just tell you, the way I purified water was an ultraviolet light. It's called a SteriPen. And you put it in a water bottle and stir it around for 90 seconds and you're good to go. And it didn't change the flavor of the water, but it made it safe to drink. And I couldn't do it here. You know, this water was so bad that I couldn't drink it. And so I had a quart of water, I had a water bottle full. And I was like, well, that's enough to get you through the night. You know, because I had a can of chili and a bag of Fritos for dinner, Frito pie for dinner. So I was like, the horses, you're gonna have to tough it out, right? But like right at sundown, a hunter who was out there on an ATV saw me and my horses and drove up, and he's asking me if I saw any antelope. I was like, oh yeah, I saw some antelope. And I was like, but I'll tell you, I'm out of water. And he gave me a gallon of water. And that was a big deal, and he was in the Navy, and he helped me farther along on the trail, and he became a good friend of mine, and he saved my bacon right here. But, and another thing is I always carried lemonade packets, or Gatorade powder, or Tang powder, because some of that water, drinking out of an irrigation ditch with like 100 mother cows upstream, you just tasted like cow manure, water. But I had to drink it, and it was no big deal to the horses, but if you put a little Tang powder in there, they were fine, you know, they were fine. So this was undrinkable water, and there's bones of cattle right here. That's a hell of a bone. Yeah. So this is not they drank the water, right? This is not a good place to be filling your water bottle. But we made it, and then one day, so mostly it was like being in a Western film. Me out there with my horses, as quiet as could be, riding all day, don't see another soul. I was like, this is the West. I was like, this is what I came for, you know. This was like really beautiful country, great place to ride. Anybody I saw, you know, they'd pick up some guy checking water or something, boy, they couldn't have been nicer. People were friendly, the country was good, the weather was good, there's plenty of grass. So right here in central Nevada, just right, almost dead set in the geographic center of Nevada, near the town of Austin, is this ranch called the Dry Creek Ranch. The headquarters is just a small building right here. This is looking out, and it was so pretty. This was like the highlight of my experience. And the Dry Creek Ranch was a Pony Express station, and there was like a shootout there with the Paiutes. There was some bad stuff that happened there. It's got a lot of history. This place was supplying horses for the Pony Express. At the valley above this place, they had a wing fence a mile long on either side of the valley that they'd run those horses into, and then a 100-foot round corral with stockade posts. And they'd run those wild horses in there, and then the work started. But this was a cool place. This was owned by a bachelor, a guy named Tom DeMelli. He had 30 horses. He's the only guy I've ever met who had a BLM grazing permit for horses. I know people do, I just never met him. He was a cool guy, and we got along really well. I don't have any pictures of him, but because I felt awkward asking. This is his barn. These are hand-hewn cedar logs. The roof is thatched with willow branches and then sod. It's not really sod because there's no grass, but like 3 inches of dirt. This is the door to his tack room. Him and his dad and his brothers made this whole barn. It's just a constant work in progress. This is the spring-fed water trough right here. Comes out of the ground and fills that trough. This is an old-style barn. The salt blocks are not old, but boy, you look at this place and you're like, this is what it looked like. This is the exterior of the barn. You can see how he's patched the roof there with baling wire and fence wire. These are local rocks that have been mortared loosely. It was a very old-style barn. This is the interior of it. These are feeder stalls here where you tie a horse to feed him and groom him before you ride him or after. This is a manger down the center where you can put feed. You see these posts are all shimmed. These are all hand-cut logs. This is pretty old. You know, it smelled like earth, like damp earth inside this barn. Very organic and very cool. And in contrast, this is in central Nevada. This is a museum in Marysville, Kansas, where that bronze statue was that I showed you at the beginning. This is the Pony Express Barn Museum. You can go to it. It's a museum today. And this is remarkably similar to that barn, Tom DeMelli's barn at the Dry Creek Ranch. Central manger, feeder stalls. Look at these windows. This is in Marysville, Kansas. This is in central Nevada. This is a barn that's still in use. These windows are just about the same. This is in Kansas. Windows just about the same. So what I realized about this, like this idea of the Old West and the Wild West and the New West, that there is no beginning or end. This is a continuum, you know, upon which our history plays into the present. And we, as Westerners, continue that. Like we carry that burden or this character, this ideology and this character and everything that goes along with it. That's part of what we're doing today when we exist on this landscape and try to keep things in the old way. The way Tom DeMelli did. Here's his barn. He's keeping it the old way. You know, it really had an impact on me. And this man, this bachelor, and what he told me, you know, he's like, we can't find any young help. He's like, a guy like you get a job on any ranch around here because there's no young help. All the young people left the country. Here, Tom DeMelli was in his late 50s, you know, weathered, old, like hurt back, all this stuff, you know, everybody knows what's going on. But he kept it alive. And like he's still an inspiration to me when I think about Tom DeMelli. So I spent 2 days at his ranch just soaking it up. And when I left his ranch, western Nevada, not like eastern Nevada. At least at the Pony Express Trail, this is the Carson Sink. It's called the Carson Sink because the rivers peter out there into in the delta. This is very difficult travel on horseback, and I think at this point my horses have had about enough of it. Badger here, I'll tell you what he's doing. He's looking east. He's like, when are we turning around? Isn't it about time to like circle these wagons and say we've had enough of this? And I was like, oh, don't you worry, guys. We can almost see California. And I remember when I came over the hill and I could see Sierra Nevada mountains, I was like, here we are. But we weren't quite there. This is what the Carson Sink was like. Hot, dry, and smoky from fires in the Sierra Nevada. And it was hard on the horses. By this time, they were tired. You know, like when I would go to get on a horse, swing my leg over, they would start walking. And I think it was because they, sure, you want me to use this? Sure, it did. So, the horses, like Badger, who I was riding a lot at this point, because their backs had changed. So the pack saddle fit chicken fry better than Badger. But when I would get on him, I'd feel him start walking in the same way that like riding a bicycle is easier when it's in motion. I could feel the horses compensating for And at this point, they were ready to quit. We finally made it to the Sierra Nevadas. You know, here is rainy. It was cold. We'd just come out of the Great Basin. It was so quiet at night in Nevada, I could hear the insects crawling in the grass around me as I'm lying in my bedroom. Dead quiet out there. Here I got to California, right near the Lake Tahoe area, where the Pony Express Trail came over, and the traffic was insane. I mean, the way people drive with their campers, you know, they're like barreling down these mountain roads so fast that it was unsettling, and it was dangerous, and it was upsetting for me. And it was in stark contrast to Nevada. And I was not happy about it. Here we're on an old abandoned highway, and it was cold and rainy. And in Nevada, the horizon was like 20 miles away. And in California, it could be like 20 feet away because the vegetation was so thick. Finally made it to Sacramento. This is Old Town Sacramento. And when we got there, I rode these horses right down the center of that road. I was feeling pretty salty, right? I was like, we crossed the West on horseback, and so everybody better just move around me. And I remember like someone in a Chevy Tahoe just like stopping right in the center of the road, didn't know what to do, but they're like taking photos of me. And I just rode those horses straight down the center of that. I said, watch out, Pony Express is coming through. And so this is the Pony Express station in Old Town Sacramento. 142 days, that's what it took. 5 months on horseback. And, you know, so 142 nights, 5 months on horseback. Best summer of my life. Tell you that, straight up. Best summer of my life, too much fun, so cool. And the big thing about this photograph is the condition of the horses. And this is very important to me that these horses look so good when they hit Sacramento. Because for one thing, I was writing a book about this. So I'm like, I can just hear him now. He tortured these horses. The horses had no say in doing this trip. Tearing up horse flesh. But they look pretty good. You know, these horses, what we'd say, they're in good flesh. And this was a fun afternoon. Certainly a relief. And the biggest relief was that I didn't have to plan where we were going to stop next. Like I had to, the biggest chore of all this, the hardest part of this entire thing was figuring out my next campsite and making sure that there were food, feed, and water there for my horses. 20 miles down the road, 25 miles, and then the next, and I was constantly looking at the maps, constantly figuring out distances, constantly handling the logistics, and that was the hardest part. It was just the biggest babysitting job of my life, looking after these horses, and they're just complete soldiers. You know, they took it all in stride, and they were in good shape and sound and healthy, and you know, bless your hearts. They carried me and my gear across the West. And so, like, really one of the biggest lessons of all this to me was the hospitality in the West, and that this idea that a traveling horseman can find open doors and open gates is very much alive and well in the American West.
Yes.
And people were so helpful, you know, they were so friendly. They offered me, people offered me horses all along the road. They're like, well, if something happens to one of your horses, you just call me, I'll bring you. We got this old paint horse that'd just be perfect for this. And I never got turned away. There was one ranch in Nebraska where they said, our insurance won't cover you camping in our pasture. And so I didn't ask any questions. I don't know what they were talking about, but I didn't care. That's the only place where someone said, you know, we can't have you for the night. Other than that, people were so helpful. You know, I'd ride out of their farm, and then 3 hours later, here come a pickup, and they got like a ham sandwich and a bottle of water. And so and I really, one thing I attribute that to is that my mother really drove into us kids that, like, you gotta have good manners. You know, you gotta be polite. And when people are welcoming to you, you gotta be polite. And to me, that meant like leaving no trash. It meant like never upsetting them, steering the conversation in ways they were doing. And I just tried to show my gratitude to them. And it worked. It's not durable. So there you go. That's the story of the last ride of the Pony Express.
Wow, wasn't that incredible? Yes. We are so blessed to have you today, Will. Thank you so much for coming in, for our members and the members of the Montana Cowboy Hall of Fame. I do want to also thank Claire for coming. Claire, his girlfriend. Can you just wave, Claire, let everybody know who you are?
Stand up, Claire.
Stand up, Claire. I want to welcome Claire because if you're going to the Cowboy Ball tonight, if you're part of the Cowboy Hall of Fame, it's over at the Heritage, both Will and Claire are coming. And what's really neat is when we met yesterday, I think Will just has the spirit of adventure. And he said, I want to immerse myself in local culture in the West. And so they went and had dinner at Bory's last night. And Claire told me she had a good time. When I told my wife I sent you guys to Bory's, she said, you really sent them to Bory's? And I said, I did. And they're coming to the Cowboy Ball tonight. So I think that this is, I don't know if there's going to be a book on your trip to Great Falls, but I hope there's at least an article. Will is going to be signing books outside of the door in a few minutes. Given that the time we have, we don't have time for questions, but I'm sure he'll have, if you want to get a book and get a signature, he'll be able to field some questions up there. Before we wrap up, I want to let you all know about some of the treasures and some adventures that are just outside of our door here, in addition to the book signing. The museum's open for a little bit. We have a couple things that are worth seeing. One is that you're surrounded by tremendous art from Tom Gillian. If you haven't had a chance to see this beautiful retrospective on the art of Tom Gillian, it's not just in this room, but in our main gallery. If you haven't seen the Cowboy Hall of Fame exhibit, it's open. You have to go through the main gallery. And then what's neat is you'll also traverse a gallery that's just partly open today. You'll probably wonder why art is in the process of being hung. And the reason it's in the process of being hung is we're preparing for the Russell, our art auction in March, on the 20th and 22nd. And if you haven't heard, it's going to be the largest art auction in our 57-year history for a couple reasons. One is that we have been blessed to win a major collection of art. It has allowed us, and then on top of that, we got just record number of consignments. Most of you know we don't sell the art in the museum. We're trying to acquire art for the museum. These are artworks that come from living artists or collectors that are looking to sell their work. One of the notable things is we have 130 pieces of historic art, and amongst those are 23 Russell artworks. That it's going to be the largest sale of Russell art in 30 years in the world. And so this is really, really amazing. The other thing that's neat about this span of work from Russell is it's everything from small pen and ink drawings. You can go downstairs and see some, to some really small watercolors, to some major masterpieces. And so it's going to be a lifetime opportunity, maybe for some of you to own a Russell or one of Russell's contemporaries. So please spend some time in the museum looking at those things. Last but not least, we opened up today free to the public, and you know it's not free to operate a museum. So this is the pitch. We would love you to become a member of the museum if you aren't. There's opportunities to give donations on your way out. But a great way to do it is we have the very best gift store in all of Montana, and it is loaded with amazing stuff. So shop until you drop. Let me just do one big round of applause for Will Grant. And with that, it's not going to be as hard as a 2,000-mile journey, but is your hand ready to sign some books? Okay. There's a table outside. You'll be able to buy books in the bookstore, and we'll sign them there for you. Thanks again, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.